All righty. So thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone.
Yeah, give me just a second here.
Yep.
All right. And the meeting is yours.
Okay.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. I've entitled this talk Right Intention. And as if you've heard any of my talks, it's broken out into three parts. So the first part is entitled Rebirth versus Liberation from Rebirth. So today is April 17th, also known as Easter or Resurrection Sunday, a Christian festival and cultural holiday commemorating the resurrection of Yeshua of Nazareth. It's celebrated on the second or the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or soonest after the spring equinox, one of the two moments during the year when the sun is exactly above the equator and day and night are of equal length. As an aside, I've personally always found it fascinating that the highest of all holy days in Christianity, the date on which the liturgical year starts and the entire liturgical year is based, is not a historical date, but a movable feast whose date is calculated based on the lunar solar calendar. The egg, an ancient symbol of fertility and new life and rebirth, has become inextricably associated with this holiday. Chicken, chocolate, or otherwise, a commemoration and celebration of new life and rebirth. You're probably wondering, Johnny, I thought this was a Dharma talk. In Buddhism and Hinduism, the beginningless cycle of repeated birth, mundane existence, and dying again is known as samsara. Samsara ends when one attains liberation. In early Buddhism, this liberation is characterized as nirvana, or the blowing out or extinguishment of desirous attachment. In later Buddhism, insight becomes prominent. For example, the recognition and acceptance of a non-self. So let's chat briefly about cosmology, religious cosmology, and chronological cosmology, one of my favorite topics. Religious cosmology is an explanation of the origin, evolution, and eventual fate of the universe from a religious perspective. There are various religious traditions and religious mythologies asserting how and why everything is the way it is, and the significance of it all. I've always had a passion for comparative religious studies, and first heard the term some 30 years ago while listening to a course on tape entitled God and Mankind, given by Professor Robert O'Dean of Kenyon College. In that course, one of his assertions is one of the reasons the Abrahamic religions, comprised primarily of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, differ so drastically from the Eastern wisdom traditions, primarily comprised of Hinduism and Buddhism, if you'll allow me to call Buddhism a religion for purposes of this talk rather than a practice. So one of those reasons is grounded in their respective chronological cosmologies. A standard Christian chronology of the origin of the world, according to the 18th century Irish archbishop named Ussher, is that the world was created in about 4000 BC. To be exact, early October of 4004 BC, some 6,000 years ago. Similarly, we are in the middle of the 57th Jewish century, which aligns generally with the Christian chronology. The Hindu chronological cosmology compares more with Carl Sagan or any modern day scientific cosmologist. One of the standard metaphors using Mount Meru is as follows. Imagine a mountain which is unimaginably high and is made of a metal which is harder than any metal known on Earth, is brushed once a year by the tip of a feather on the wing of a passing bird of prey. The world is older than the amount of time it would take that bird of prey to wear down that mountain to nothing. In other words, it's old. And once it dies, it's going to start all over again. Against that time span, the goal of Hinduism and Buddhism is to get off of the wheel of birth and rebirth. It's tedious. It's punishing. It's suffering. The goal is not to be reborn, it's to be released from samsara, to be released from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Contrasted with Christianity, where one must be reborn. Coupled with Judaism and their brief cosmologies, the goal is to attain personal immortality, because they assert that we simply have not been around that long. A brief cosmology begs for more. An unfathomably long cosmology begs less. So lastly, right intention. Why do I draw these distinctions? I offer them as points of clarification rather than points of contention. In my youth, I often heard and believed that all wisdom traditions essentially taught the same thing. This New Ageism perspective essentially whitewashed the beauty and nuance of each tradition's multifaceted offering. There may be commonalities, but all wisdom traditions do not teach the same thing. Someone may offer a weary traveler directions. Another may always tell her to make the next right. Yet a third may simply want to sit with her and engage her to share her adventurous travelogue. One act is of service to our traveler. The other is an act of service to oneself. And the third facilitates a new possibility. Right intention, also known as right resolve, along with right view, shares one of the three basic divisions within the Noble Eightfold Path, that of wisdom, or insight, or to use the Sanskrit term, prajna. Right intention is formally known as the giving up of home and adopting the life of a religious mendicant in order to follow the path. And if you will allow me, commitment, coupled with why I am committing. As I mentioned before, there is common ground among most religions, among most wisdom traditions, and that is some version of the Golden Rule can be found. In Christianity, in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. In Buddhism, treat not others in ways that you yourself would find harmful. Whether you are interested in finding common ground or being contentious, I urge you to do it with clear and wise intention, heartful resolve. If you are committed, know why you are committed. Is it to be of service to another? Is it to be of service to yourself? Or is it to explore a new possibility? So to my friends and family who do celebrate Easter, I bid you a happy and joyous Easter Sunday, Wesołych Świąt. And to my friends and family who do not celebrate Easter, I bid you a happy and joyous Sunday. I love you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. First thing is I'm going to have to take out my master's staff and give you a whack because we use the term appropriate in pragmatic Buddhism rather than right. But other than that, I loved your talk. First time I've taken out the master's staff in a while. I really liked your emphasis in the talk. And I invite others to chime in as well. The cosmology is an interesting concept because while there is a Buddhist cosmology, and it is what you quoted, that arose well after the Buddha. During the Buddha's life, he was actually asked about cosmology. And there are famously 14 unanswered questions that the Buddha refused to give answer to. And 4 of those have to do with cosmology, essentially. And 14 is the official number on the list, but usually they're grouped in groups of 4. So the one on cosmology is the universe eternal? Is it not eternal? Is it neither eternal nor not eternal? Or is it both eternal and not eternal? So those don't count as 4 questions to me. It's 1 question. Is the universe eternal or not? And he refused to answer it. He said, that's not what I'm here to teach. I am here to teach this world and how to operate in it, how to be free from suffering, how to free ourselves. Honestly, in the unanswered questions, he didn't even deal with the concept of freeing ourselves from samsara. It was purely release from suffering in this world and living a moral life in this world. So after he died, the monks reached back into Hinduism and said, yeah, that's the cosmology we follow too. So it imported it kind of whole cloth into Buddhism. But the Buddha himself refrained from teaching about cosmology. And it's one of the reasons that we applied the name pragmatic to our form of Buddhism. And it's also one of the reasons that I constantly get people, when we set up a booth at festivals or anything, every festival we've ever been at, I'll have at least one person come by and say, pragmatic Buddhism, isn't that kind of redundant? Well, yeah, it is. Buddhism is very pragmatic. But that doesn't mean there's not other things for us to consider. And you brought up a lot of those in the talk, Johnny, so thank you. And for those who are new, the discussion period is not just me giving feedback to my students on their talk. It is all of us discussing. I just always like to start off. That way we avoid that long period of silence when nobody's.
Great to see you.
I'm Daphne. I was just talking about Zoroastrian things in this morning, actually. So, like, it's an interesting little wedge because Zoroastrian cosmology is something like the universe exists for a little, like some specified time, it's somewhere around 7,000 plus years, but then it restarts. And hell is temporary. You go to hell and you're purified, you learn your lesson, and then everybody gets rejoined. And then it starts over. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of a mix of what is now, like what is considered the Abrahamic religions, just like.
Yeah, Johnny, this is Brian. I thank you for your talk. I very much appreciate the symmetry of, you know, what your goal is in regards to eternity is strongly influenced by what you think eternity looks like. if you're trying to get off the wheel because it's incredibly long, that, you know, versus whether you are trying to get onto your one chance to get on the eternal train. That's a really nice way of framing that contrast.
And to be fair, I struggled with this talk and probably spent more time organizing and writing this talk than I have any other. And I did not want to underscore the distinction piece of the talk, but rather the intentionality of whatever I'm doing, am I doing it clearly and mindfully? So there's a way for me. I have friends that are very much looking to get on the eternal train, and they do so with grace and respect um, and service. And it doesn't need to be an either or for me. I feel sometimes it's an either or for them, but that's not my place to I'm not going to die on that hill. I'm happy for them, and I continue doing what I need to do. But it is an interesting, that's the sciencey part of me that, given the different perspectives.
And I think that's actually for me where I can draw the statement that all religions, all wisdom traditions have the same base teaching. I get what you were saying, and I agree with the distinction you made, but those of us who do take the view of many paths to the top of the same mountain, it is that all of them emphasize compassion and what we would call loving kindness. And that's where we have a commonality. And I think that's where the fact that all of the wisdom traditions have a version of the golden rule comes in, because it is about how do we treat each other and ourselves. Several years ago, there was a project that came through called the Peace Quilt, and it was an ecumenical project. They had one panel from each religion in the world giving their statement of the golden rule, and it wrapped around in a labyrinth going from the youngest religion, which theirs was Baha'i, and all the way back to the oldest that we can trace. And so it was very interesting to go through this and read how each religion stated that goal of treating each other with compassion and loving kindness.
And that goal is essentially like, just trying to realize that other humans are equally human and valuable as you are.
Hi, it's Alice. What you were just talking about sort of the universality of compassion. Throughout times in my life, people who had different belief systems and different practices than I did would say things like, well, I'm praying for you. Or, well, they would devote some spiritually influenced words of kindness toward me. And for a long time, I felt as if I was obligated to say like, oh, thank you, but I'm not Christian, or oh, thank you, but blah, blah, blah. Because I felt as if almost like, oh, don't give me that, I can't appreciate it. It was this very strange thing. And it had only been a few years ago that I was able to see the universal softness and compassion in those statements, that this is for them how they deliver that compassion in a vernacular that they understand and know. And so I'm finally able to see that for what it is in my own framework that makes sense for me, and say thank you for that. It means a lot, and really take it for how it was intended, not well, I can't take it in this specific package, so you can have it back. Oh.
Yeah, John.
I'll follow up on what Alice said, because I've thought about that before myself. And the way I've always accepted that is that if their moral compass is right and they are a quote, good person, and you see that they are following their walk, in other words, their walk and their talk. And when they say, I'm gonna pray for you, I love that because I feel that they are in another way plugging into the same higher power. Mine is a cosmic consciousness, and theirs is a God sitting on a throne. But I think those prayers still work. I think I'm still getting positive vibes. I think I'm getting positivity sent toward me. That's how my mother taught me to look at it when I was growing up. And that has stuck with me. I'll do that.
Yeah, it's one of the important things to deal with, and especially in Western Buddhism. And the reason I say that is that many people come to Buddhism in the West after having suffered some harm or trauma caused by the religion that they were brought up in, whatever it may be. And so there tends to be a rejection of religion, or especially a rejection of the religion I was brought up in. And so when people say, I'll pray for you, it's that immediate, like hell you will, I left you for a reason. But what we have to remember is the basic teaching of the Buddha is to let go of all of those forms of dualism and those attachments to one way being right and another necessarily being wrong. And that's actually why I mentioned to Danny at the beginning of my remarks that we use the word appropriate in the Eightfold Path for that exact reason, to let go of the view that there is a right intention. There is an appropriate intention at the time and in the situation, but there is not a single right intention. So what we are called to do is to release that idea that any way is right or wrong. Now, that being said, it's still fine to say there are harmful and helpful ways of acting. And we can oppose, and we must oppose, harmful ways of acting. But when it comes to a person living their philosophy and wishing us well from the point of view of their philosophy, we have to say, thank you. It's the only option we have as Buddhists.
I'll put forward a slight objection, because you also get the phrase, I'll pray for you if you're gay and this person thinks you shouldn't be, or you're not Christian and this person thinks you should be. So it depends on their intention.
Right, exactly. And I think that's where it ties back into what Johnny was saying. It's, yeah, and I will even now, when it's presented in that way, there I will reject their prayer. I will say, no. No. But when it is offered, as John said, when it's offered from a spirit of loving kindness, of I want the best for you. I pray that you receive what is best for you. Sure.
The way I perceive the dualism of right and wrong is appropriate, and using your using your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience that you possess, and your moral compass is on target. You're going toward what is helpful as opposed to what is not helpful. The appropriate decision will be the most helpful one for me. the way it works for me. It makes it more monitored.
Yeah.
Than, to appropriate is monistic. Right and wrong is dualism.
Well, us and them is dualism.
Yeah.
Right? That's the idea of us and them, like, oh, we're special, so we're gonna get this kind of special treatment. And I think that they're related, right? They're mirrors of each other. It's right and wrong and us and them. And I think that also ties into this idea of intention, and that there is no us, them, right, wrong, where it's all just is, right? And that to me is kind of where things start to break down. That dualism is really at the root of a lot of hate, because then it goes to right, wrong, and that's them, and you don't want to go down that.
For the pop culture reference, but only Sith deal in absolutes. That's like one of my favorite things, like. A lot of times, like, when I read Buddhism, I read Taoism, like the idea of being skilled and unskilled in different ways, in between, appropriate, inappropriate, and various. The Taoist concept of when there is right, you immediately create wrong. But that's not just wordplay. It really is. You've created what is divine and infernal. You are demonizing some aspect of humanity, as opposed to accepting humanity as being, maybe you would even think it flawed or just unskilled or ignorant. But the thing about ignorance is that it's not a sin. The sin is to refuse to learn, refuse to grow. And I just think that, like, I hate to be us and them, but a lot of times it leaves a bad taste in my mouth when I encounter people that are just so rigid. And when they say they'll pray for me, because I'm trans and gay and all that, I say right back at you, like, you're the one with the problem. So you need more than that.
Two quick comments. One is I heard I have a popular reference, but I didn't hear what the reference was.
Oh, it's only Sith deal in absolutes.
Star Wars.
Okay, I got to get my geek on. But so in that vein, I did delete the line when I was talking about getting off the wheel of samsara of quoting George Jetson saying, "Jane, get me off this crazy thing." So I deleted that out of respect for the Dharma talk. But what I'm reminded of also is, and again, I can bristle at the old, I live down south where bless your heart and I'll pray for you is the common salutation that I often get. I have a good friend down here though, and he says it with the thickest Southern drawl. He says, people don't do right, but I have to remember I'm people. And that brings it back to me so quickly. And I just use it as fuel for my commitment, my intention of my practice. And as I often, whenever I express my frustration, or what can I do? Well, what's my intention? To change the other person, or to maybe kind of recommit to my practice? And Glenn has often offered me the 3 golden precepts, which is, well, if I don't know what to do, first I can try to do no harm or no additional harm. Then I can do good, and then maybe I have a shot at doing good for others. That's what I try to weave into my day on daily practice. I fall woefully short many times, but I keep going back to that buoy, that mile marker. So, but thank you for your comments. Anyone online have any comments? No? Anyone else at the center? I'll take silence as a no. I'd love to see your smiling faces, but I understand we're not doing that. So why don't we conclude our practice with on page 3, or, oh, there we go. Thank you, Brian, with the Bodhisattva vow. Creations are numberless. I will strive to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I will strive to transform them. Reality is boundless. I will strive to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I will strive to embody it. May your thoughts, words, and actions be corrective and encompassing of the pragmatic Buddhist path. May you approach this week with deference and dignity, and may you spread your personal peace to all those you encounter. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Swaha. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a lovely week.
Thanks all, and have a great week.
Did you like this?
Yeah, if you would help to pick up the cushions and pile them in the back. That's another part of our experiment, by the way. We may eventually get to